A few moments with you on the pew, pew, pew.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Pew. My name's Matthew,
And I'm Ver.
and today we have Peter with us. Peter, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm first year with these guys. I live in Marycrest. I am studying engineering, although I don't like it. I am in Air Force RTC, and worst piece of news is that I'm transferring next year to the Air Force Academy.
Devastated.
Awful news. So bad.
It was because I love all the guys here, so
Yeah.
it's bittersweet.
And where are you from?
I'm from Cleveland, Ohio.
Cleveland.
Mhm.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, we're going to get started. Get ready. We're going to get on the hot seat.
Okay.
So I have a few questions for you. Kind of just a hodgepodge. First one, milk before or after the cereal?
Oh, after cereal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book of the Bible?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
although recently I'd say Corinthians a lot.
First or?
Either one.
Either.
Yeah.
Just give you one of the Corinthians and
Yeah.
you're happy. Do you have a favorite body of water?
Not Lake Erie.
Just not like
just
Erie.
yeah, just
Any
not
Lake
Lake Erie.
Interesting. Do you prefer sweet or salty food?
Probably sweet.
Do you have a favorite sweet?
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate. Oh, that's a hot take. I
It's
really do like hot
dark,
chocolate,
It's dark
but I can't
chocolate.
say that out loud
Like
in front of most
98%.
people.
Yeah, like I'll just munch on like a cold like.
Oh. Cold. I am
Just a
with you.
bean. A cocoa bean.
I have before.
Just cocoa powder.
I have
Interesting.
eaten. Yeah, but
Oh.
I digress.
Do you have a favorite, like, not unimportant, but like weird or minor holiday?
Not too much, although just like growing up, like, I'm a Catholic family, but like my dad was like adopted and like Jewish, heritage and all that stuff. So we celebrated Hanukkah just a
That's
little
cool.
bit, but like not,
Just a little bit.
yeah, not super intently, but yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite saint?
I think a really cool one. He's a sleeper, Saint Oswald of Northumbria. He's my confirmation saint.
Interesting.
And I kind of chose him because he was Tolkien's inspiration for the character Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
That's awesome. You chose him at the time for that reason.
Yeah, for that reason.
Do you have a favorite virtue? Not like a special, like just any that you can
Okay.
think of that you try to like maybe like live your life by, or like that you think about a lot.
I don't know if it's virtue per se, but like empathy. I'm really big on empathy.
Wow.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's
This
crazy.
keeps happening.
This happened before. So our last guest, Audrey, talked on her podcast about empathy versus sympathy.
It's like they're leaving a residue on the pew.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That's crazy.
What the heck?
No, I've been living that way for a while. Like
Yeah.
I don't know, something about it. I like, feeling and connecting with other people. And I think it's something that needs to be done.
Yeah.
That's
And
good.
then I have one more question. If you could change your name to anything, do you have a name that you'd change it to?
Not really. My mom gave me Peter, and she always calls me her rock.
Aw,
So
that's so
yeah.
cute.
Although she has said like possibly Paul, and Paul is a pretty cool guy, so I'd consider that, but nothing else.
I
Really.
think you're a Peter.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
For sure.
Well, congrats. You made it on the hot seat. You're back to the pew.
On the pew.
Perfect.
Phew.
Yeah. Okay. So we heard that you wanted to talk to us a little bit about sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering, like, what are a couple of examples of the kinds of sacrifice that you're thinking of?
Well, so first, I'd just like to say, like, I think sacrifice and suffering are two things that go together a lot, and I think for very good reason. I just want to make a little distinction that, like, sacrifice is something that's very intentional, and suffering is, for the most part, a component of sacrifice. But suffering, as we know, isn't always intentional. And, I think it can go good or bad, both ways. But I just want to make that little distinction. Because, some examples of suffering or sacrifice I, see is, I'm going to, start and then go back to it, the ultimate sacrifice, Jesus on the cross. Is like, that's such a big point in history that most people know about, even if you're not religious. So it's like, I think there's definitely something to be said there. And in the Bible, I like the story of Nicodemus because it's not really like a traditional sacrifice. You don't usually think of sacrifice when you think of him. But he, if you don't know, he was a very high-ranking Pharisee at the time. Had a lot of money, had a big family, and so he was kind of given an opportunity to follow Jesus, almost as an apostle. You see this if you watch The Chosen, um, and he just didn't, just because of his family life and his position with the Pharisees, he didn't take that opportunity. But we can see at least how they portrayed in The Chosen that was agonizing for him to do, to choose not to follow Jesus. And I think that sacrifice was big because, we're all, given special gifts and talents. And, outside of not following Jesus, I'm sure he put, that goodwill to other use.
Wow.
Yeah. And then pointing to the, ultimate sacrifice on the cross, we learn that Jesus is ultimately God, and God is without sin, and for that split second, he goes through all the pain and agony leading up to his cross and crucifixion. For that split second, he takes on sin, or he has an interaction with sin as he takes on the sin of the world and eradicates it. It's like that's putting two totally opposite things together, God and sin. Like they never clashed until that moment. And so it's a very humbling thing. And big.
Yeah.
And I know that you talked, like, as you were describing, like, sacrifice and suffering together, and you said, like, suffering is almost like a component in your eyes of sacrifice. Like, what else would you say, like, what are the components and, like, fruits of sacrifice?
Yeah. So I think, like I just said, there's humility and like servitude, because servitude in of itself is a form of sacrifice. We heard in the recent gospel, Jesus says, like, those who serve me must follow me, and where my servants go, or where I go, my servants will also be. So it's like, you have to sacrifice, you have to give, you have to be humble, but at the same time, you get to share in the glory of, the ultimate, wherever that sacrifice leads. And then similarly, I think, obedience, we see that Jesus was obedience to his sacrifice throughout his life. But obedience isn't always a bad thing, because it's kind of hard to make every single little decision for your life, when sometimes you can sacrifice maybe your pride, and follow the orders of someone else, and that can lead to very good things. And then ultimately, I'd say sacrifice shows love in its truest form, I'd say.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. Sounds like a lot of components.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, all culminated together.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty good definition of sacrifice.
Yeah. And I feel like you kind of touched on this a little bit, like at the ending there, but like, why are we like called to sacrifice? Like, what's like the purpose of that?
Yeah. I think it's a really hard thing, first of all, because I think many times, at least in our contemporary culture, we're trying to make things easier for future generations. Like, why should life be hard if we can make it easier? And I think sacrifice is a very telling part of who we are and how we love. It's like, if you hear stories like mothers and their children are suffering, and it's like the mother is also suffering by having to experience that, but the mother would trade the whole world just to be in that room with her child. And like I said, Corinthians, I like Corinthians a lot. I have a little verse here, and it's from 2 Corinthians 5, and it goes, "Therefore we are not discouraged, rather though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. For this momentary light affliction is producing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to what is seen, but to what is unseen. For what is seen is transitory, but what is unseen is eternal." And so I think by that, it's just like, sacrifice is just this light affliction. It's like something you have to go through to get down to the very base being. And what that is love and how we treat other people, and give of ourselves to others, so that we may also receive that love. Um, for me personally, I felt called to talk about sacrifice is because being in called to the military. Like I'd never like thought about being in the military. If you would have asked me a year ago, I'd been like, what? But it just kind of happened, and I feel that like I'm very equipped to deal with the military lifestyle. And I think for me, I feel called to protect others, and in doing so, I think the order and financial setup of the military, I think it holds some future promise to me, in being able to provide for a possible future family, or whatever else I go on in my life. So it's like, I think sacrifice is it could be, moment focused, but it can also be very future focused.
Hmm.
Because Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, we're still referring it to us, referred to it today, because it's so meaningful. And I was talking with my one friend Ronnie, and it's like in the Book of Revelation, it's like the crucifixion is this defining point. The crucified Jesus was the one in the beginning who said, "Let there be light." And it's a lot to wrap your head around, but it's like sacrifice and suffering isn't. It's kind of almost outside the bounds of time, and that's ultimately what love is, because God is love, and how we experience and exist with others is love. So it's like, why wouldn't we sacrifice?
Yeah, that's
Wow.
awesome. Thank you for sharing. I feel like that was very insightful. I think a few of the things that I really appreciated was like how you connected suffering and sacrifice, but I think some people could be too quick to just say that they're the same thing, because they're
Yeah.
not. So I like the idea of like intentionality and how that affects sacrifice. And I also like, I mean, obviously, like you provided a wide variety of like sacrifice from Jesus all the way to our own everyday life, and I think that's like important. I think sometimes we might be like, whether we realize it or not, like we are sacrificing things, we just may not be thinking in that lens, and then also vice versa. Like I feel like if we start to like think about our actions in our life and whether that is like a sacrifice or not, I think we'd kind of surprise ourselves, if that makes sense.
And it's definitely relative too.
Yeah.
You know.
That's true.
A lot of things I think about is like Lent, when people give up. Everyone makes their own sort of sacrifice in their life, and in most cases we try to make it like a good sacrifice. But giving up one thing for someone might be huge. Just based on how their life is, and for someone else it might be kind of easy. So
Yeah.
we don't really want to compare sacrifices.
Yeah.
Because it's a very personal and relative thing.
Awesome.
I love how you tied in that Bible verse. It's just like always a good reminder too, with like life. I mean, especially like as a college student, like stuff gets busy and it's like easy to just like kind of like get like swept up into that and kind of like complain or like be like frustrated with it. But like kind of like tapping into like not to like say it's like extreme suffering, but like to tap into that and like lean into sort of just like leaning on like the love and like of God, and like kind of like taking a step back and just like being present with that. I feel like it just like there's a part like in like for me at least like in my heart where it's just like you experience it in like such a different lens, where there's like a different joy or different peace like in that experience, instead of like frustration or like agony, I guess. So.
Yeah. And I think that's very telling with Jesus' sacrifice. It's like, we're not always happy when we're sacrificing, but we look towards, where we're going with joy, as we know, if we're ultimately giving of ourselves, we're offering it up to something greater.
Awesome.
Well, there is a lot there. That I feel like lots to reflect on, lots to think about. But thank you so much for taking your time.
Of course.
And for being so intentional about like what you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, I could talk on for hours. So if anyone wants to talk to me about it, I'd be down. Yeah.
Little mandate. Hit up Peter for a mandate.
I need to fill up my schedule before I leave, guys. So send me those
Yeah.
Google Calendar invites.
Yeah.
ASAP.
Yeah.
ASAP.
ASAP.
We'll tag them. So hit them up. But thank you all for watching.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Pew 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 pew.